Blood on her hands meant she was going to be late. Being late meant she couldn't buy her daughter's asthma medication. Claire made a choice that cost her the only job keeping them off the streets. She didn't know the bleeding stranger in the alley owned the entire building. The alarm didn't buzz. It rattled. It vibrated against the particle board nightstand, a frantic, pathetic noise that Claire felt in her teeth before she even opened her eyes. 5:15 a.m. The room was cold. Not chilly, but deeply structurally cold, the kind of damp that settled into the plaster and breathed out a smell of wet dust and old cooking oil. Claire hit the button. Silence rushed back, and heavy and thick. From the other side of the thin drywall, Lily coughed, a dry, rattling hack that ended in a sharp intake of breath. Claire squeezed her eyes shut. She held her breath, counting seconds in the dark, waiting. 1, 2, 3. Lily's breathing leveled out into a faint, reedy whistle. Not an attack, just the morning clearing of lungs that had no business living in a basement apartment with black mold creeping up the bathroom tiles. She swung her legs over the edge of the mattress. Her feet found the worn slippers instinctively. Every morning was a math problem. 45 minutes to shower, dress, and pack Lily's lunch. 20 minutes to walk Lily to Mrs. Gable's apartment down the hall. 12 minutes to speed walk to the bus stop. 38 minutes on the 42 bus. A 4-block sprint to the towering glass monolith of the Zenith building. If she clocked in at 8:01 a.m., she was docked 15 minutes of pay. If she clocked in at 8:15 a.m., she was written up. 3 write-ups meant termination. She was on write-up number 2. Both previous infractions were courtesy of the city's collapsing transit system. By 7:30 a.m., Claire was out the door. The sky over the city wasn't gray. It was the color of dirty dishwater, leaking a persistent freezing drizzle. Her boots, bought on clearance 2 winters ago, leaked at the heel. She felt the icy dampness seep through her cotton sock with every step. The bus was a rolling petri dish of wet wool stale coffee and the sharp sour tang of unwashed bodies. She stood in the aisle, gripping a plastic hand strap slick with someone else's sweat, staring blankly at an ad for personal injury lawyers. Her chest felt tight. Not asthma. Just the permanent crushing weight of being 31, raising a 6-year-old alone, and having exactly $42 in a checking account until Friday. The bus hissed to a halt at 8th and Market. 8:37 a.m. She had 23 minutes to make a 15-minute walk. She could do it. Claire hit the pavement, walking fast, her head down, dodging umbrellas that threatened to take out an eye. The rain was picking up, slicking the pavement with a greasy sheen of oil and water. To shave 3 minutes off her route, she ducked into the alley between a boarded-up shoe store and a parking garage. It was a narrow, foul-smelling cut-through. Garbage bags were piled high, reeking of rotting vegetables and wet cardboard. She was halfway down the alley when she saw the shoe. It was a leather Oxford polished to a dull gleam sticking out from behind a green dumpster. Claire stopped. Her heart did a strange, annoyed flutter. No. Please, no. She took a step forward, peering around the rusted metal bin. A man was crumpled against the brick wall. He was wearing a dark wool overcoat that had absorbed the rain and dirt. His knees were drawn up, his head slumped forward. But it was the puddle that made Claire's stomach drop. A dark, viscous pool was spreading outward from his hip, mixing with the rainwater and drifting toward the storm drain. The air suddenly smelled sharp and metallic. Pennies and rust. Claire looked at her wrist. 8:43 a.m. Walk away, a voice in her head whispered. It sounded exactly like her own voice, just tired and ruthless. "He's a junkie. Or a drunk. Someone else will find him. You cannot lose this job." She took a step back. Her boot scraped against a broken glass bottle. The man groaned. It was a wet, wretched sound. His head rolled to the side, and Claire saw his face. He wasn't young, maybe late 50s. His silver hair was matted with a dark paste. A brutal gash opened up his forehead, the edges ragged. His skin was the color of old wax. "Help!" he mouthed. No sound came out. "Damn it!" Claire hissed. She didn't feel heroic. She felt a surge of hot, desperate anger at the universe, at the man at the blood. She dropped to her knees beside him. The wet asphalt soaked instantly through her cheap polyester slacks, freezing her kneecaps. "Hey," she said, her voice shaking. "Hey, can you hear me?" His eyelids fluttered. One eye was already swelling shut, purple and angry. His lips moved. Claire pulled her phone from her coat pocket. The screen was spiderwebbed with cracks. Her thumb slipped on the glass as she dialed 911. 911, what is your emergency?" a bored nasal voice asked. "There's a man. He's bleeding. In the alley between Market and 9th, behind the parking garage. I think he was mugged." "Is he breathing, ma'am?" "Yes, but he's losing a lot of blood." Claire looked at his hip. His coat was sliced open. She reached out her hand, hovering, then pressed down on the thick wool where the blood seemed heaviest. The man let out a sharp, breathless scream, his hand shooting up to grab her wrist. His grip was shockingly weak, his fingers freezing cold. "Keep pressure on the wound, ma'am. Paramedics are 3 minutes out." Claire shoved the phone into her pocket. She leaned her weight onto her hand, pressing against the man's hip. The blood soaked through the wool, warm and sticky, coating her palm, slipping between her fingers. It was revolting. Her stomach heaved. "You're okay," she lied, glaring down at him. "The ambulance is coming." His hazy, unfocused eyes drifted to her face. He was shivering violently. "Briefcase." He slurred, a bubble of blood popping at the corner of his mouth. "They took it, I'm sure," Claire said, her voice clipped, anxious. She glanced at her watch. 8:49 a.m. "I am so fired." "Cold," he whispered. Claire cursed again, louder this time. She unwrapped the faded acrylic scarf from her neck and awkwardly bunched it up, pressing it against the gash on his forehead with her free hand. She was now kneeling in a puddle of water and blood pinned to a dying stranger in a garbage-choked alley. Sirens wailed in the distance, bouncing off the concrete towers, growing louder. "Hold on," she told him. The flashing red lights cut through the gloom at the mouth of the alley. An ambulance jumped the curb. 2 paramedics piled out, rolling a gurney, their boots splashing heavily in the puddles. "Over here," Claire yelled. They reached her in seconds. A woman with a tight blonde ponytail dropped a bright orange trauma kit beside them. "We got him. Step back." Claire didn't need to be told twice. She scrambled backward, her wet shoes slipping on the pavement. She stood up, wiping her bloody, sticky hands on her already ruined pants. She felt numb. She watched as they cut the man's expensive coat away, shouting medical shorthand to each other. "Ma'am, we're going to need your name," the male paramedic said over his shoulder, not looking at her. Claire looked at her watch. 8:54 a.m. If she ran, if she literally sprinted, she might make it to the elevator bank by 8:59 a.m. "I didn't see anything," Claire stammered. "I just found him." Before the paramedic could turn around, Claire bolted. She ran out the opposite end of the alley, her lungs burning, the metallic scent of another human being's life force clinging to her skin. The lobby of the Zenith building was a temple of polished marble, brushed steel, and excessive heating. It smelled of floor wax and wealth. Claire burst through the revolving doors at exactly 9:02 a.m. She was a mess. Her chest heaved, pulling in jagged, painful breaths. Her hair was plastered to her skull. Her tan trench coat was smeared with a horrifying mixture of alley grime and rust-colored stains. She kept her hands balled into fists in her pockets to hide the dried blood under her fingernails. She swiped her plastic key card at the security turnstile. A harsh red light blinked. Beep. Access denied. Claire froze. She stared at the little digital display on the turnstile. She swiped it again slower. Access denied. "Hey, Claire!" The voice came from behind her. It wasn't the security guard. It was Brenda. Brenda was the floor manager for the data entry division on the 14th floor. She wore a beige blazer that matched her beige disposition. She held a clipboard against her chest, her posture rigid, her face locked in an expression of weary disappointment that she wielded like a weapon. Claire turned around. Her heart, which had been hammering from the run, suddenly seemed to stop entirely, sinking like a stone into her bowels. "Brenda, hi. My card isn't working." "I know," Brenda said. She looked Claire up and down. Her eyes snagged on the dark, wet stains on Claire's knees. The missing scarf, the general look of a woman who had been dragged behind a car. Brenda's nose wrinkled slightly. "I had security deactivate it." "What?" Claire's voice cracked. "Why? It's 9:04 a.m., Claire." "I know I'm late. I know. But there was an emergency." "There's always an emergency," Brenda sighed, tapping a manicured fingernail against her clipboard. The sound was deafening in the cavernous lobby. "Last month it was the bus broke down. The month before, that your daughter was sick. Today, honestly, Claire, look at yourself. What is this performance?" "It's not a performance," Claire said, her voice rising. She pulled her hands out of her pockets. The rusty brown flakes were obvious on her pale skin. "A man was bleeding to death in the alley off Market Street. I had to stop. I had to call 911. I had my hands on his." She gestured wildly, struggling to find the words. "I was trying to keep him from bleeding out." Brenda stared at Claire's hands. She didn't look horrified. She looked deeply inconvenienced. She took a half step back, as if failure and poverty were contagious. "That's a very dramatic excuse, Claire." "It's not an excuse. Call the police. Check the dispatch logs. I just left the paramedics." "It doesn't matter," Brenda said softly. The coldness in her voice was absolute. "We had a conversation after your last tardy. You signed the paperwork. A third infraction is automatic termination. The Zenith Corporation requires reliability. If you can't be at your desk at 9 a.m., you are of no use to this company. Brenda, please." The words tasted like ash in Claire's mouth. She hated begging. She hated the way her voice shook, the way tears of pure, impotent rage pricked the corners of her eyes. "I do good work. My keystroke rate is the highest on the floor. I need this job. My daughter has asthma. Her medication is $90 a month. Rent is due in 4 days. I am not your therapist, Claire. I am your manager." "Well, I was." Brenda reached into her oversized beige tote bag and pulled out a small cardboard banker's box. It was shockingly light. She held it out. "I cleared your desk, your personal effects. HR will mail your final paycheck to the address on file." Claire stared at the box. Sticking out of the top was a small plastic succulent she had bought at a dollar store to brighten up her gray fabric cubicle walls. Next to it was a framed photo of Lily grinning with missing front teeth, wearing a yellow raincoat. Her hands trembled as she reached out and took the box. It weighed nothing yet. It felt like it was pulling her down through the marble floor, burying her alive. "You're firing me," Claire whispered, "because I stopped to save a man's life." "I'm firing you," Brenda corrected, checking her watch, "because you are a liability to our workflow. Security will escort you out." Brenda turned on her low kitten heels and walked toward the elevator bank. She didn't look back. Claire stood in the lobby holding her pathetic little box. A security guard, a burly guy named Mike, who used to nod at her every morning, now looked at her with polite pity. He gestured toward the revolving doors. The walk home was a blur. The adrenaline crash left Claire shivering so hard her teeth clicked together. The rain had stopped leaving behind a humid, oppressive chill that soaked into her bones. She didn't take the bus. She couldn't justify the $2.50 fare anymore. She walked the 3 miles back to her neighborhood, the cardboard box cutting into her forearms, her mind a spinning roulette wheel of disaster. No job, rent due Tuesday, $90 for the inhaler, groceries, the electric bill. She stopped at a pharmacy 2 blocks from her apartment. She walked down the brightly lit aisles, acutely aware of how she smelled of the dried blood still flaking off her cuticles. She went to the pharmacy counter. She handed the technician her credit card for Lily's inhaler refill. "That'll be $94.12, the teenager behind the counter said, popping his gum. Claire swiped the card. She closed her eyes, praying to a God she hadn't spoken to in a decade. Processing. Approved. She let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. She had maxed out the card. There was nothing left. No safety net. No backup plan. Just a plastic tube of medicine, a box of desk junk, and a void where her future was supposed to be. When she walked into her apartment, Mrs. Gable was sitting on the lumpy brown sofa watching a game show. Lily was sitting on the floor coloring with broken crayons. "Mommy?" Lily scrambled up, running over. She stopped halfway, her nose crinkling. "You smell funny, and your pants are dirty." "I know, baby," Claire said, setting the box down on the small kitchenette counter. She forced a smile that felt like wet cardboard tearing. "Mommy just had a clumsy morning." Mrs. Gable stood up, her joints popping. She took one look at Claire's face, the hollowed-out eyes, the pale skin, the banker's box on the counter. The older woman didn't ask questions. She just nodded slowly. "I made some extra chicken soup," Mrs. Gable said quietly, walking toward the door. "I'll bring a bowl over later." "Thank you," Claire whispered. When the door clicked shut, Claire went into the tiny bathroom. She locked the door. She turned on the sink, the pipes groaning in protest. She stared at herself in the spotted mirror. She looked 10 years older than she had when she woke up. She looked down at her hands. She pumped cheap pink liquid soap into her palms and began to scrub. She scrubbed until the water turned pale pink, washing the stranger's blood down the drain. She scrubbed until her skin was raw and stinging. Then she sat down on the edge of the cold porcelain bathtub, put her face in her hands, and cried silently, making sure not a single sound reached her daughter in the other room. 3 days passed. They were thick, sluggish days, the kind that blur together in a haze of cheap coffee anxiety and the glow of a laptop screen. The apartment smelled intensely of boiled elbow macaroni and the metallic tang of radiator heat. Outside, the city had settled into a bitter, dry cold. Inside, Claire was fighting a losing battle against the digital void. She had submitted 34 applications on various job boards. Data entry, receptionist, retail, anything. Every morning she woke up before Lily opened her email and read the automated rejections. "We regret to inform you." while your qualifications are impressive, we have decided to move forward with other candidates." The phrasing was always so polite, so sterile, a velvet glove over an iron fist punching her in the gut. By Thursday afternoon, the walls of the apartment felt like they were shrinking. Lily was napping on the couch, her chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm, the expensive plastic inhaler sitting on the coffee table like a crown jewel. Claire was at the small dining table staring at a spreadsheet of her finances. It was a joke, a morbid, mathematically impossible joke. She needed $800 by Tuesday. She had $18 in cash and 0 available credit. She was mentally inventorying what she could pawn. Her laptop. It was 5 years old and missing the H key. Her wedding ring. She had sold that 3 years ago to pay for Lily's emergency room visit. Her phone buzzed against the wood table, startling her. The screen was dark, displaying an unknown number. Her stomach tightened. Debt collectors usually waited until a bill was 30 days past due, but maybe they were getting proactive. She let it ring 3 times. The vibrating felt aggressive. Finally, she swiped to answer. "Hello." Her voice was hoarse from disuse. "Is this Claire Reynolds?" The voice on the other end was male smooth, with the kind of polished articulation that sounded expensive. "Yes." "Who is this?" "My name is David. I am the executive assistant to the CEO of Cole Enterprises. I'm calling on behalf of the executive office. We've been trying to reach you." Claire frowned, her mind racing. Cole Enterprises was the parent conglomerate that owned Zenith. They owned the building, the data entry firm, everything. Were they suing her? Did Brenda somehow file a grievance against her for leaving blood in the lobby? "If this is about my termination," Claire said defensively, sitting up straighter in her creaky wooden chair, "I've already surrendered my key card. HR should be mailing my final check." "This isn't about your termination, Ms. Reynolds," David said. There was a pause, a slight hesitation in his perfectly modulated voice. "Actually, we would like you to come in. To the corporate office. Today, if possible." "Come in for what?" "There's a matter that requires your presence. It won't take much of your time. We'll arrange a car." "A car?" Claire looked around her cramped, dingy living room. "I don't understand. Am I in some kind of legal trouble?" "No, ma'am, absolutely not. If you could just be downstairs in 30 minutes, a Blacktown car will be waiting." The line went dead. Claire stared at her phone. The cracked screen reflected her bewildered, tired face. This had to be a mistake, or a sick joke. But people who played sick jokes didn't usually know about her firing or have her cell phone number. She looked down at her clothes. She was wearing sweatpants and a faded t-shirt. She had exactly 25 minutes to look like a human being again. She woke Lily, asked Mrs. Gable to watch her again, enduring another look of deep pity from her neighbor, and changed into her only decent remaining outfit. A black skirt and a gray sweater that hid the fact that she had lost 4 pounds she couldn't afford to lose in the last 3 days. When she walked out of her building, a sleek black Lincoln Navigator was idling by the curb, looking entirely alien against the backdrop of pawn shops and liquor stores. A driver in a dark suit stepped out and opened the rear door for her. Claire slid into the leather seats. It smelled like rich pine and expensive cologne. She felt profoundly out of place, a street dog invited to a purebred dog show. The drive was silent. They pulled up to the Zenith Building Cole Enterprises headquarters. Claire's stomach churned as she walked through the revolving doors. She half expected Brenda to jump out from behind a marble pillar with a clipboard. Instead, A young man in a tailored suit, David, she presumed, was waiting by the security desk. He didn't ask for a key card. He simply nodded at the security guard who let them pass immediately, leading Claire toward a set of elevators she had never been allowed to use the executive bank. "Thank you for coming, Ms. Reynolds," David said as the elevator shot upward with stomach-dropping speed. The button for the 50th floor was illuminated. The penthouse. "Why am I here?" Claire asked, gripping the handle of her cheap purse tightly. "I was fired from a data entry floor on Tuesday. I don't know anyone at Cole Enterprises." "You'll understand shortly." David set his face, a pleasant, unreadable mask. The elevator doors chimed and slid open. The 50th floor was a different world. There were no fluorescent lights humming like angry hornets, no gray fabric cubicles. The floors were rich, dark hardwood, covered in thick woven rugs. The lighting was warm and ambient. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a dizzying view of the city now bathed in the harsh pale light of late afternoon. It was quiet, a deep, insulated quiet that money bought. David led her down a wide hallway lined with modern art that Claire didn't understand, stopping at a massive oak door at the very end. He knocked twice gently, then opened it, stepping aside to let her in. "Ms. Reynolds is here, sir," David announced, pulling the door shut behind her. Claire stood just inside the room, her heart hammering against her ribs. The office was enormous. Behind a massive mahogany desk sat a man. He was looking out the window, his chair turned slightly away. "I appreciate you coming down," the man said. His voice was a low gravel, raspy and dry. It sounded strangely familiar, but Claire couldn't place it. The man turned his chair around. Claire stopped breathing. It was him. He looked different, of course. He wasn't lying in a puddle of dirty water and his own blood. He was wearing a crisp white dress shirt, though the collar was unbuttoned, and he wore no tie. His right arm was wrapped heavily in a stark white cast, and resting on a sling. The left side of his face was a mosaic of ugly dark bruising, purple-yellow, and sickly green. A line of neat black stitches tracked across his forehead, disappearing into his silver hair. He looked battered. He looked tired. But his eyes, sharp assessing and startlingly clear, were locked directly on her. On the polished mahogany desk in front of him, sitting on top of a stack of legal documents, was a crumpled, blood-stained acrylic scarf. Her scarf. "Ms. Reynolds," Harrison Cole said, leaning forward slightly, wincing as he did. "I believe you left something behind on Tuesday." Claire stared at the scarf, then up at his bruised face. Her mind short-circuited. The man bleeding in the garbage. The man she had ruined her clothes for. The man she had lost her job for. He wasn't a junkie. He wasn't a drunk. He was the billionaire boss of the company that had just thrown her out onto the street. "You..." Claire started, her voice barely a squeak. She cleared her throat, a sudden, irrational anger fighting through her shock. "You took my scarf." Harrison Cole offered a small, lopsided smile that didn't reach his bruised eyes. "You shoved it against my skull to stop my brain from leaking onto the pavement. The paramedics bagged it with my personal effects. It took my team 2 days to track you down through the dispatch records and lobby security footage." He paused, his gaze dropping briefly to the desk before returning to her. "They told me you ran before they could get your name." "I was late for work," Claire said flatly. The sheer absurdity of the situation stripped away her fear, leaving only a bone-deep exhaustion. And for the record, it didn't matter. They fired me anyway. Harrison leaned back in his chair, a slow, deliberate movement. The silence in the massive office stretched thick and heavy. "I know," he said softly. "I know they did." She sacrificed her only job to save a bleeding stranger in a freezing, garbage-choked alley. It cost her the ability to feed her daughter. 3 days later, a Blacktown car arrived. The dying man wasn't a junkie. He was the billionaire CEO of the company that just fired her. "You know," Claire repeated. The words tasted like old pennies. She didn't feel relief. She didn't feel the sudden sweeping cinematic joy of a rescue. She felt a hot, venomous spike of pure resentment. Her fingers dug into the cheap imitation leather of her purse strap. She looked at the blood-crusted scarf on the mahogany desk, a filthy, ruined piece of acrylic sitting in a room where a single chair cost more than her annual rent. "You knew I was fired for saving your life," Claire said, her voice dropping into a dangerous, ragged whisper. "And you waited 3 days to call 3 days while I figured out which pawn shop would give me the best rate for a toaster so I could buy asthma medicine." Harrison Cole didn't flinch. The heavy silence of the penthouse pressed in on them, punctuated only by the faint rhythmic ticking of a grandfather clock in the corner. The room smelled of cedar and expensive old paper. It was a sterile, insulated smell. "I was unconscious for 48 hours, Ms. Reynolds," Harrison replied. His gravelly voice lacked defense or ego. It was simply a statement of biological fact. "They had to reconstruct the orbital bone around my left eye, and I lost nearly 4 pints of blood. My assistant David began looking for you the moment I could speak coherently. The bureaucratic machinery of Zenith is vast." It took him 12 hours to cross-reference the dispatch logs with the lobby security footage. Claire stared at his bruise-stitched face. The anger in her chest hit a wall of exhaustion and simply dissolved, leaving a hollow, aching cavity behind. She let out a breath that shook the edges of her lips. She looked down at her shoes. The left one still had a faint, rusty stain near the rubber sole. "It was a mugging," she asked, the fight draining out of her. "Corporate espionage masquerading as a mugging," Harrison corrected smoothly, adjusting his injured arm in its stark white sling. "I was carrying a physical ledger. They wanted it. The knife was just to ensure I didn't follow them out of the alley." He gestured toward one of the plush leather chairs opposite his desk. "Please, sit." Claire didn't move. "I don't belong in that chair. I don't belong in this room. If you brought me up here to hand me a check and clear your conscience, just do it so I can go home. My neighbor is watching my daughter, and she charges by the hour." A faint, humorless smile touched the corners of Harrison's mouth. He pulled a thick cream-colored envelope from the stack of papers on his desk and slid it forward. It stopped right next to the bloodied scarf. "There is a check in here," Harrison said quietly. "It is for $50,000. Claire's lungs seized. 50,000. It was a mythical number. It was rent for 3 years. It was a car that didn't stall in the rain. It was a warm coat for Lily that wasn't bought at a Goodwill clearance sale. "Take it," Harrison urged, his sharp eyes pinning her in place. "It is compensation for the clothes you ruined, the trauma you endured, and the profound inconvenience my bleeding body caused your morning commute." Claire took a step forward. Her hand trembled as she reached out. Her fingertips brushed the heavy textured paper of the envelope. It felt thick, substantial. But as she touched it, a wave of nausea rolled through her stomach. She looked past the envelope to the scarf. She remembered the metallic stench of the alley, the cold rainwater seeping into her kneecaps, the terrifying weakness in his grip. She pulled her hand back. "No." Claire breathed the word, startling her as much as it startled him. Harrison's good eyebrow arched slightly. "No, Ms. Reynolds. I am not a man who offers charity lightly. Consider it a hazard pay. It is charity," Claire shot back, her voice finding its steel again. "And it's blood money. You think you can just write a check and erase the fact that your company threw me out like garbage. I didn't lose my job because I was late. I lost my job because your floor manager, Brenda, looked at a woman covered in blood sobbing in your lobby and told her she was a liability to the workflow. I lost my job because the Zenith Corporation is a machine that grinds people into dust for being human. Harrison's expression darkened. The shadows in the penthouse seemed to lengthen, pooling around the heavy mahogany furniture. I read your personnel file, Ms. Reynolds. You had 2 prior infractions for tardiness. The bus broke down on an icy bridge. Claire yelled, not caring about the volume of her voice anymore. And my 6-year-old was choking on her own lungs. I typed 90 words a minute. I never missed a deadline. I ate lunch at my desk every day, so your data entry metrics stayed in the green. But your system doesn't see a single mother trying to survive. It sees a time clock. You built that system. You own the building. You write the rules. She pointed a shaking finger at him. Brenda didn't fire me. You fired me. So keep your envelope. I don't want a handout to fix a problem your company created. Silence slammed back into the room. It was thick and suffocating. Claire's heart thudded against her ribs like a washing machine off balance. She had just screamed at a billionaire. She had just rejected a fortune. She was entirely irrevocably insane. She grabbed her cheap purse, turned on her heel, and marched toward the massive oak door. Wait! The command was soft, but it carried a weight that made Claire stop with her hand on the brass doorknob. She didn't turn around. She just squeezed her eyes shut, fighting back the hot prickle of tears. You are absolutely right, Harrison said. Claire looked over her shoulder. The older man was standing up. It was a slow, agonizing process. He braced his good hand against the desk, his face draining of color as he forced his battered body upright. He stood awkwardly, leaning his weight heavily on his right side, but he refused to sit back down. He looked directly into her eyes, stripping away the billionaire facade, leaving only the man who had begged for his life in a pile of garbage. I built a machine. Harrison said, his voice raspy, his breathing shallow. I spent 30 years building an empire of efficiency. I automated out the errors. I instituted policies to eliminate variables. I forgot that the variables are the people keeping the lights on. I forgot that the machine is entirely cold until someone decides to stop and press their bare hands against a dying stranger's wound. He took a slow, painful step around the desk. When Brenda fired you, Harrison continued, his gaze unwavering, she was following page 42 of the employee handbook, a handbook I approved. She operated exactly as I designed her to, and it disgusts me. Claire swallowed hard. Her throat felt tight. So what? She asked, her voice cracking. Are you going to fire her? Are you going to rewrite page 42? I am going to do both, Harrison stated flatly. But I cannot fix a machine I no longer understand. I need someone who knows exactly where the gears are grinding. I need someone who understands the cost of $50 to a family living on the edge. I don't want to give you a check, Claire. I want to give you a job. The Zenith building lobby felt different Monday morning. It didn't smell like fear. It smelled like floor wax and expensive coffee. Claire pushed through the doors at 8:52 a.m. She wasn't running. She wore a new navy blazer bought over the weekend with a salary advance. Her sturdy leather loafers clicked rhythmically against the polished marble floor. She bypassed the data entry division entirely. Stepping into the executive elevator bank, she swiped her card. The light blinked green. She pressed the button for the 49th floor. The doors parted to a drastically different environment. Sunlight poured through expansive windows, illuminating open workstations. Claire walked down the main corridor, her stomach fluttering, but her posture remained straight. She found her office. The frosted glass plaque read, "Claire Reynolds, Director of Policy Reform." She set her purse on the sleek wooden desk. A large peace lily sat near the window. Next to it was the framed photo of Lily in her yellow raincoat. Her first meeting was at 9:30 a.m. Claire sat at the head of a small glass conference table. The door clicked open. Brenda walked in. The beige blazer remained, but her disposition had shattered. She looked pale, carrying her clipboard like a shield. Seeing Claire in the executive chair, Brenda stopped breathing for a second. The realization washed over her face. The woman she had discarded into the street was now dictating her employment status. "Sit down, Brenda," Claire said. Her voice wasn't laced with vengeance. It was simply tired and calm. Brenda sat, placing her hands flat on the table to stop them from shaking. "Ms. Reynolds, I was informed of the restructuring. I was strictly adhering to the attendance matrix." "I know you were," Claire said, opening a file folder. "That is exactly the problem. You executed your duties with robotic precision. You looked at a human in crisis and saw a spreadsheet error. Harrison Cole built this company to run like a clock, but clocks don't bleed." "Are you terminating me?" Brenda asked, her voice shrinking to a frightened whisper. "No," Claire softly said. "Firing you doesn't fix the manual. You are being reassigned. Effective immediately, you are moving to payroll administration. You will manage numbers, not people. Read the drafted revision for the emergency leave policy before going. Next time an employee comes with a crisis, they are met with a conversation, not a cardboard box." At noon, Claire took the elevator up to the 50th floor. David waved her right through. She knocked on the heavy oak door and stepped inside. Harrison Cole was at his desk. The bruising on his face had faded to muddy yellow. The stitches were gone, leaving a thin red scar across his forehead. He signed documents with his left hand, his right arm in a sling. He looked up. "I saw the transfer order for Brenda." "She's a liability to the workflow," Claire said deadpan. Harrison let out a raspy bark of laughter that ended in a wince. "Fair enough. How was the first morning?" "Complicated," Claire admitted, walking to the window and looking down at the sprawling city. The streets looked like gray ribbons. There's rot in the foundation. The policies are divorced from reality. "Then fix it," Harrison said, simply dropping his pen. "Tear out the rot. I gave you the budget and authority. Use them." Claire turned around. She looked at the man who changed her existence. There was no magical erasure of past trauma. She still remembered the panic of swiping her credit card for the asthma inhaler. But the crushing weight was gone. "I bought groceries yesterday," Claire said quietly. "I filled the entire cart. I didn't look at a price tag." Harrison's expression softened. "How did it feel?" "It felt like breathing." She turned to the door, placing her hand on the brass knob. She had to rewrite the new maternal leave policy. She wouldn't be late. "Ms. Reynolds," Harrison called out. "Thank you for stopping in the alley." Claire offered a small, imperfect smile. "Thank you for getting out of it." She walked out of the office, ready to dismantle the machine piece by piece. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and share it with someone who needs a reminder that humanity still exists in the darkest places. We bring you raw, grounded stories every single week, so make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications to never miss an update. What would you have done in Claire's shoes? Drop a comment below and let's start a conversation. Your support helps us keep telling these stories. Thank you for watching.